All right, good morning, everyone. It's 8 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. A reminder that this is recorded so that if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or if you need to go back and review it later, I will get it posted in the course announcements here a little bit later today. So we'll start off with the material for this week. Then we will talk about the assignment a little bit, and then we will open it up for any kind of questions and answers that you may have. So this is week 7, just one more week after this one. But really, this is the last week where there's new material to cover, because for week 8, that there is no new material. You just have a final project, and I think another discussion next week. No, actually, I think it's just the final project for week 8 next week. So yes, this is the last week with new material. All right. And so this week is all about arrays. Now, I will use the word array and list interchangeably. They both mean the same thing. And you will see some people call it array, some people call it a list. But it's really talking about the same thing in Python. There is no difference. Okay, so what is an array? Well, array is not much different than a string that we covered last week. I encourage you to go back and review the video from last week about strings if you need to. But a list is very much like a string is. A string was a sequence of individual characters, right? A list is a sequence of what we call individual elements, meaning it'll look like this. So let's say we have a list called A, and we put these brackets right here, and that's what defines a list. Now, this doesn't have anything inside the brackets, so right now the list is empty. But just like you had to do for the last assignment where you had a list of student names, right? Well, we can do the same thing here. See, me, you, Dan, Vicky. All right. So what I've done here, I have defined a list. A is the variable name of that list, and these are the individual items in that list. Now here there are 4 items in the list: me, you, Dan, and Vicky. Of course, you can add more things onto this. That's not a problem. For more and Bob, and that's fine. Now we have a list with 5 items in it. And with Python, they don't even necessarily need to be the same type. For instance, all of these are strings, right? They're all strings, but I can put numbers in here. That's no problem. We can do that. It's not very common to do that. It's not very common to mix the different types. By that, I mean, this is a string, this is a string, this is an integer, and this is a float, right? Java lets me do that, but I wouldn't say it's very common. Let's just show you it works. I can print out the list A, and whenever I run that, it just prints out the whole list right here. There's no error or anything, even though I have different types in here. Not Java. Python lets you do that. Again, not extremely common, but you may think of a use to where you can have different types in there. So you think of an array or a list. Like I said, I'll use the words interchangeably. It's just a sequence of individual elements. And what do I mean by element? An element is the individual item in here. Like this string is an element. This string is an element. This string is an element, so on and so forth. This float is an element of the array. Now, how do I access the array, very much like how you access characters in a string. Let's say if you want a sub 2 or a index 2, that's how you access an individual element of the array. You have the array name, you have the you have the open and close brackets, and inside of here, you'll have a single number, and that number designates which element you want to access. And the important thing is you need to remember is that the counting of these elements starts at 0. So whenever I want the number 2 element in here, you have to start counting at 0, meaning this is the 0 element, this is the 1 element, and this is the 2 element. So when I'm saying this array A, element number 2, I'm talking about this one right here because the counting starts at 0. Let's show you it works. Let's save it and let's run it. And that just prints out Dan. It doesn't print out the entire array anymore. It prints out one single element from that array, which is right here. If I select the 5th one, which one is it going to be? Well, let's count. There's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It should be the number 4. It should print out 4. Let's run it. And sure enough, it prints out 4 right there. Now, just like with strings, we can use negative numbers in here. I'm not going to harp too much on the indexing of it, because like I said, it's identical to how we did the strings last week, and you can go back and watch those videos to get a lot more in depth with indexing it. But let's say if we put -1 here, we can use negative numbers as the index. And when you see a negative number, it means just start counting from the end. And in this case, we don't start at a -0. There's no such thing as a -0. So -1 is actually the very last item. Let's show you that's the case. Save it and run it. And there we go. The array at -1 is the last number. If we put -3 here, what's it going to be? Well, negative means we start counting from the end, and it's 3. So we go 1, 2, 3. It should print out Bob. Let's run it. And there you go. We get Bob printed out. This indexing is the same we did last week for strings. Go back and review that video if you need kind of some more practice on that indexing. Okay, let's talk about traversing an array. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is also extremely similar to what we did for the strings last week. Let's say we want to traverse or iterate over all of the elements in this array. Well, there's actually several ways we can do it. First is like for elements in A. And then let's just print the elements. So what is that doing? It's saying take the array A, and we're going to do a loop. And each time we're going to select one element. So the first time inside this loop, the element is the first item. The next time in the loop, element will be this one. The next time in the loop, element will be Dan. The next time in the loop, the element will be Vicky. So what we will do here, let's print out the entire array, because just A, that's the entire array. It's not an individual item. So we're going to print out the entire array. Then we're going to do a loop for each element in the array. we're just going to print out that individual element. Let's run it. There you go. You can see the first thing we do, we print out the entire array. And now we're doing a loop where each time we're getting one single item in the array, one single element. To show you that's the case, let's just put here start loop. And here we'll put an end loop. So that you can kind of see the separation and the distinction between each element. Let's run it. There you go. So again, there's the entire array. And then that is one loop. That's the loop executed one time. And you can see the element is me. There's the second time the loop is executed, and it's you. The next time the loop is executed, and it's Dan. And then let's just get down to the end. This is the last time the loop is executed, and the element is the last element in the array. So that's how you can loop over each element in the array. The other way you can do it looks like this. And we've done this with the strings before, and we've also done it earlier in the course when we first started talking about loops. For I in range length of A. Let's type it out and then we'll explain it. Okay, so what we have, of course, we still just have our array. Then we're just going to print out what the whole array, just what the entire array is. Then we're going to print out the length of the array. You don't need to print these things out just to do a loop. I'm just printing these out so you can see them printed on our console window so you can see what the values of them are. So the first thing we'll do, we will print out A. Then we're going to print out the length of A. And in this case, the length of A is going to be how many elements are in the array. So since we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because we got 7 items or 7 elements in this array, the length of A will be equal to 7. Okay, and then we have this kind of loop. It's a little bit different than the last one. Here we're going to say I in the range of the length of A. So we've already determined that the length of A is how many elements, right? So that's going to be 7 in this case. Of course, if we delete one out, the length of A is now 6, right? So the length of A is how many elements are in A. Even if you go back and change it later, it's always going to be how many elements are in there. So then we have this range of the length of A. So right now, length of A is 6, right? Because there's 6 things in here. So whenever we do range, what it actually does is counting from 0 up to, but not including that number. And what do I mean by that? So since this is the number 6, the length of A is 6, what range will do, it'll count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It does not include the 6, but it counts up to the 6, but not including it. And it starts at 0. So if I did this here, let's say if I removed all of those. So now the length of A is 3. So this range will count 0, 1, and 2. And so what the loop does with this for I in the range, it allows you to loop over each of those counting numbers. So again, since the length of A is 3, because we have 3 elements, this loop will count I. I will be 0, then I will be 1, then I will be 2. Let's show you that. Let's just print out what I is. Let's save it and let's run it. And there you can see there is A, our array. There's the length of A, which is 3. And then we have our loop. We do a start loop. We're going to print out I, and then we end the loop. So if you look at our loop, the first time in the loop, I is 0. The second time in the loop, I is 1. And the next time in the loop, I is 2. You know, if we add more stuff here, it's going to count through all of those. So let's run it. And there you go. There's your entire array. The entire array has a length of 5. And then you count. You do this for I in range loop. And each time you print out I. So I is 0, then I is 1, then I is 2, I is 3, and I is 4. Okay, that's great. That gets us an I. So how do we access the array with that? Well, earlier you saw we did arrays like this, right? A with an index 3 gets us this right here, right? A with an index 1 gets us this. Well, what if we have an A at index I? Well, we already saw that I will count from 0 up to, but not including the length of this array. So here, the first time I will be 0, then the next time I will be 1, then the next time I will be 2, so on and so forth. So let's do this. Let's print I is this. So each time in our loop, we're going to print out the value of I, but we'll also print out the array at that index of I. Save it and run it. And there you go. There's our entire array. That's the length of the array. Now, the first time in the loop, I is 0, and it's the element me. And that's right. Next time, it's 1, and it is you. And that's right. The next time, it's 2 and Dan. That's right. Then it's 3 and the value 4. That's right. And then lastly, it's 4. I is 4, and it's the element 3.14. So that's the 2 ways you can access each individual element in the array. Now, why would you want to use one over the other? You know, is there a reason to use one over the other? And the answer is yes, there actually is. This one is a little bit simpler to do. You know, disregarding the extra print statements, let's just take out these extra print statements. So this one is actually slightly easier because inside of the loop, you don't have to remember anything about the array. In this loop, you do have to remember which array it is, which is A, and the index that you want to access. Here, you don't have to worry about either one of those things. You just know that each time in the loop element is the element that you're working with. In this loop, you have to remember which index you are, and then you have to access it like this. Very slightly more complicated, but there is a reason why you would use that. And let's look at why. The why is because of the next topic, and it is modifying array elements. Now, last week when we were talking about strings, we said that strings are immutable. And what do I mean by that is that if you have a string, let's say you have a string S, that's Dan, I can access each individual character like this, right? just like we've done with lists, the string at index 1 is actually going to be the letter A, right? Save it and run it. And you can see that's the case. It prints out an A. The thing is, you can't change that A. So if I have S of 1, I can't change it to be another letter. Python does not allow you to do that. If you try to do that, it crashes. And it tells you right here, a string object does not support item assignment. And it tells you, the errors on line 4. We look at line 4. This is where the error is. And that's because once you create a string, you cannot change the individual letters in that string. You can't do it. That's what we call immutable. It means it can't be changed. But we can change individual elements of a list. So we have our list, we have our array. Let's just print out the entire array. Let's change item 1 to be Yoo-hoo. And then let's print out A again. So will this crash? And the answer is no, it won't crash. This will actually work. And that's because I'm saying the array at index 1, which is right here, because this is 0, this is 1. I'm going to say this entire element is now this different string. So I'm not changing like individual letters of this string. I'm just replacing the entire string. Let's save it and run it. And there you go. You can see that this is my original array. And now I have changed one of the items. I've changed this right here to be something different. I can do it with any of them. So let's say, let's change the last one. Let's do a -1. Remember, that gets the last item. And let's change it to dog. I don't know. Save it and run it. And there you go. You can see still that I changed index 1. And right there, you can see it. I changed index 1. And I changed index -1. -1 is the last item. I changed it from 3.14. I changed it to the string dog. So how is this helpful whenever I was talking about the different loops? Well, let's imagine these were all we just had an array of numbers. Okay. So we'll have an array of numbers. Let's loop through those numbers using the 2 different ways for elements in A. And I should note here, element, it's just a variable name. You can use whatever variable name you want. You could use that if you wanted. That's not very descriptive, so it doesn't help your programming. But you can use whatever variable name you want. I like using element because it describes what I'm accessing. So for each element in the array, let's just say we want to square the number. We'll say the result is the element times the element. We're going to print the result. And then at the end, we're going to print A again. Okay. We're just doing some kind of mathematical computation on the numbers. It doesn't have to be square. It can be whatever you want to do. Let's just do a square operation. Okay. We run it. There we go. There's the entire array. Here, we're accessing each element and we're squaring it. So 2 squared is 4, 5 squared is 25, 1 squared is 1, and so on and so forth. And then at the end, we print out the array again. But let's say we want to remember what the result is. Let's say we want to store the result back into the array. Well, I can't do it with this kind of loop. Why not? Because if I want to change the value in the loop, I need to know A, the array, but also in here, I need the index, right? But I don't have an I for this kind of loop. I don't have an I. So what is the value of I here? This is going to crash because there is no value of I. So do I put a 0? Well, if I do that, it makes all of them, they're kind of overriding themselves at 0, right? So that's why you need the other loop for I in range, the length of A. And now you can have the A at index I. We don't have the element anymore though, but we can get it like this. Let's delete that result. So this is why it's useful to use this kind of loop. It's because you can change the items in your array. So now we're going to say the array at index I is equal to what's there right now times itself, which is just squaring it. And then we're going to print out the array. So let's save it. Let's run it. And there we go. There's the array we started out with. And now that's the array at the end. And you can see we have squared each number. And it doesn't just have to be numbers. You can do whatever you want with this. Let's just say we had these 3 strings. Well, you can't multiply strings together, but let's just say we want to know how long they are. What happens if we do this? Okay, well, we're still going to loop through and count 0, 1, and 2, because it's based on how long this is. And then we're going to say the element at that I position is equal to the length of whatever's there. And so actually this should be 3, 2, and 3, right? And there it is. Here you've stored back into the array, whatever change that you wanted to make. Okay. Moving on. You can do there are some array operators. Here's what I mean by array operators. Let's say we have 2 arrays. We can do different things with these 2 arrays. Let's say print A, print B. We can do things like this. We say C is equal to A plus B. And what is that going to do? What it's going to do, it's actually going to concatenate those 2 arrays together. And what I mean by that is this array C is now going to be equal to the combination of all of these elements. And let's see that. If we run it, you can see that this is A, this is B, and this is C, which is A and B added together. It just takes all of the elements of both arrays and puts them into a single array. That's what it means when you have a plus sign with 2 arrays. It just takes all of the elements of both and puts them into one array. That's a plus sign. The only other one that kind of really makes sense is a multiplication. Here we don't really have a B anymore, let's say we have A times 2. What is that going to do? It actually is going to repeat these elements that many times. So what you'll see happen is A is equal to this array with these 3 elements. C is going to be a new array, and it's going to have all of these same elements, but they're going to be repeated this many times. So here they'll be repeated twice. Let's save it and run it. And there you go. That's A. And this is C. It's where you just have the same elements repeated that many times. If I could put 4 here, and it would repeat it 4 times. There you go. There's A, and there's A times 4, which there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. May or may not be useful for you. Python does allow you to do it. One thing it's kind of good for, let's say you want to make like a banner go across your screen. What I mean by banner is like a bunch of text, and you want to have the text separated by some lines. Well, you could do this. Let's say we have an array of stars. What happens if we just print this like it is? It just prints out the one single star, right? Well, we could multiply that by, let's say, 30 times. We save it, and now we run it. We get all these individual stars. If you wanted multiple stars. So that's how you can add and multiply arrays, and really what it means. Now, can you subtract arrays, and can you divide arrays? And the answer is no. But logically, if you think about it, those don't really make sense. The plus makes sense because you can just imagine just taking all the elements and putting them together. That makes sense. But there is no subtraction for arrays, and there is no division for arrays. You only have the plus and the multiplication for arrays. All right. Going to spend less than 1 minute on array slices. The reason why I'm going to spend less than 1 minute is, for one, you won't use them that often. And for two, it was covered extensively in our strings last week. Oops. Let me just make our array here. It was covered extensively in the strings video last week, and it works the exact same as string slices. So I'm just briefly going to touch on it as a refresher. But if you want more in-depth with array slices, then just look back at the video from last week where we go over string slices, and it works the exact same way. So, like I said, if we print out A is the entire array. Right? A with, say, a single number index just prints out a single element. This will print out the me. We can also have what we call slices of the array, and that means it's more than one element of the array. It starts off looking like this. First, you tell it where you want to start. Let's say I just want these excuse me, let's just say I want these 2 elements. Well, where do I want to start? What is the index of this one? The index of that is 1, right? Because this is 0, this is 1. So we'll start at 1. Then we put a colon, and then we put where we want to end plus 1. And what do I mean by that? Let's say we want to end at the U. What index is U? Well, that's 0, that's 1, that's 2. So it's 2, but we got to add 1 on to it, so that makes it 3. And what this does, this kind of takes like a subsection of this array, or a subarray, meaning it's a portion of the array. And the portion of it goes from 1 to 3, but not including 3. So watch what happens. So here is the entire array. This is array at index 1 right there. And this is the array from 1 to 3. And you can see it's me and you. It goes from 1 up to, but not including 3. That's what an array slice is. If you want, you can omit one of the numbers. And if you leave out the first number, it just means that you want to start at the beginning. So you could put a 0 here, or you could leave it blank. Either way, that would mean start at the beginning. So if we save it and run it, you can see our array slice now starts at the beginning, but it still goes up to, but not including the third item. Likewise, you can leave out the last item. If you leave out the last number there, it just means go until the end of the array. So whenever I run that, you see still there's my entire array. There's still the element at index 1. And here I'm getting a slice starting at 1 and going until the end of the array. And you can see right there, it does. It starts at 1 and goes until the end of the array. So that's array slices. And that's just if you want a subsection or a subset of your entire array. All right. Last few things I'm going to talk about. There are some array methods. These are really about adding and removing items from the array. Okay. So let's say this is what our array is. Let's print it out, of course. Let's say we want to add a new element. How do we do that? We can do it with what we call the array.append. And then in here, we put whatever we want to add. I'm just going to add the number 64. And then we'll print it out. Okay. Let's run it. There you go. You can see that that's the array I started with. And then I appended 64 onto the array. And now you can see my array is the original array, and it has 64 as a new element. I could do this a bunch of times. Let's say if I want to do it in a loop, range, not rand, range, I, kind of what is this going to do? Remember, the range of a number just counts up to that number. The I is each individual number through the loop. So this is going to count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm taking 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm appending it to my array. Let's see what happens. There you go. We have the original array. And now we appended a bunch of numbers to it. And this is what we end up with. We end up with the original array and then all those numbers appended to it. We could also just get user input. We could do append input, type something. What's that going to do? Well, we'll still have our original array. And then actually, let's start off with a blank array and show you it still works even if there's nothing in it. So we'll start off with a blank array. We're going to print it out. You'll see it's blank. We're going to loop 5 times. And each time we're going to append onto the array. And what we're going to append is input from the user. So type something. So you can imagine maybe you want to type in student names. So put Dan, Bob, Jill, me, and you. Okay. So now you can see We started off with a blank array. We printed out. There we go. There's the blank array. We looped 5 times. There it is, 5 times. We got the input from the user and we appended it to our array. And then at the end, we just printed out the array. And you can see right there, our array now has all those things that the user typed in. So append just lets us add new elements into our array. Okay, so that's append. It adds individual elements. All right, let's say we have these 2 arrays. So I've already shown you, you can use the plus sign like this, right? Remember what happens with that? Oops, forgot that. Close parentheses. And that one. Yep, there we go. Print out A, print out B, and then we'll add A and B. Right? We do that. There we go, just like we did before. There's A, there's B, and there's A plus B. And then we saw we can do A dot append. Well, we saw that what the append did. But now instead of A plus B, we can also do A dot extend B. So what does that do? So A is this array, B is this array, and then we're going to print them out. And then we have A dot extend B. So A is an array and B is an array. So what that does, it does effectively the same thing that the plus sign does, except now it actually changes A. Let's run it and you'll see it more clearly. So we print A, which is the A array. We print B, which is the B array. Now we're going to A dot extend B. That just puts them all together inside of A. And then we print A, and you see it's everything from both of the arrays. So it's different from append. Append just takes one single element, but excuse me, but extend takes another array and puts them all together. Probably won't see that too much, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. All right. Just a couple more examples, and then we'll start wrapping it up. Okay. You can also sort them like this. Just your array dot sort. What this will do, it'll sort them alphabetically. So let's print A there. Let's print A there. So we'll print out the array just like it is. We're going to sort it, and then we'll print it out again. There we go. There's the array before it's sorted, and there's the array after it's sorted. And you see, it does indeed sort them. Okay, that's easy. All right. So we saw how to add items. Let's see how to remove items from our array. You have a few options. One is called pop. So we can say element is equal to A dot pop, and then the index that we want to remove. Let's say we want it to be B. So what we'll do, we'll print A. Here we'll print the element, and then we'll print A. So we can see how it changes. So what pop will do, it will remove the element at this index, and that one is going to be this one. And it'll give it to you. It'll give you whatever the element is, but it also removes it from the array. Let's save it. Let's run it. There you go. That's our original array. We're going to pop the element at 1. So we're popping Bob, and you see we do get the element Bob, and now Bob is missing. Okay, we can do it 2 times in a row. Well, we can do it as many times in a row as we want, really. So there you go. We have the original array. We pop element 1. Element 1 is Bob. So we get Bob, and then there's the array after it's popped. Now we're going to take the array again, and we're going to again pop element 1. Element 1 is now Jill. So we get Jill, and after it's popped, after it's removed, we're left with just Dan. So pop can remove individual elements. It'll give you what the element was, and it removes it from the array. All right. Let's talk about remove. So the pop works on which index it is. So this pop, I'm saying index 1, so I'm saying Bob. Well, what if I want to specify it by name? Let's get some input from the user. Enter name to remove. So how do we remove a specific element? By value. Instead of saying remove index 1, I want to say remove Bob. Well, we can do it like this. Say a dot remove whatever we type in. Well, let's comment that out. I could put specifically, let's say Jill for A. And let's see what happens. And there you go. There's the original array. Now we remove Jill, and you can see the array no longer has Jill in it. Likewise, if we wanted to, we could do it. We could let the user tell us who to remove. So we're going to have the user type in the name to remove. Then we're going to remove that name, and then we'll print it out. Same concept. So let's say we'll remove Dan, and there you see Dan was removed. So what happens if it's something we don't have? It actually crashes. And it crashes because it's trying to remove this ASDF that I typed in, but it does not exist in the array. And so it actually crashes my program. So whenever you remove something, you need to be sure that it's actually in there. All right. There's a couple other things about deleting by slices. It's not very useful, probably just confuse you more. And you don't really need to know it. Of course, look in the course materials if you want to see how to delete like a slice of an array. But it's not that important. I'd rather focus on more important things. All right. Very last thing I want to go over. Let's say we have an array of numbers. 1, 7, 3, 5, 2. All right. So we have those numbers. We actually have ways to get the smallest, the largest, and things like that. And the average is pretty easy. So let's look at it. So we can get the smallest one like this. There's a Python function called min. And if you give it an array, it'll give back to you the smallest item. We can get the max like that. That'll give us the biggest number. We can get the sum of all the numbers, just like that. So just like in these 3 lines of code, I'm getting the minimum number, I'm getting the maximum number, and I'm getting the sum of all the numbers. Let's try it out. There you go. The minimum is 1. That's true. The max is 7. That's true. And the sum, what should the sum be? That's 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. The sum should be 18, and there it is. There's the sum of 18. What's the quick way we can get the average of these numbers? Well, we can get the sum of the numbers and just divide by the length of that array. So, the average is the sum divided by how many you have, right? Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing the sum divided by how many we have. So what should the answer be? Well, it's 18 divided by, let's see, 5. That should be like 3.6 or so, I think. Let's save and run it. And yep, there you go. There's the average, 3.6. And the nice thing is, you can keep adding stuff onto here, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to change any of this other code. Let's run that. There you go. The minimum is now -1. Yep, that's right. The maximum is 32,456. Yep, looks right. That's the sum. You can sum that up yourself if you want. And that's the average. Okay, so those are some functions we can use that are built in with arrays. All right, that's pretty much all of the material for arrays, which, like I said at the beginning, that's the final material that you have to know for this baseline Python course. This is definitely not all there is to Python. Python gets significantly more complicated. But for the baseline course, this kind of concludes the material that you should know. Okay. Spend just 30 seconds to a minute on the assignment, and then we'll let you ask questions. So for the assignment, just like in past assignments that I've mentioned, read the entire assignment one time through just so you get an overall idea of what you need to do. But then go back and reread it one sentence at a time. Okay. And whenever it tells you your program has to do something, kind of make like a little comment in your program, right? So I'm going to do up the comments here for you for this assignment, but then it'll be up to you to take those comments and kind of convert them to code. But what I want you to watch and what I want you to realize is you really should read the assignment one sentence at a time. If that sentence is telling you to do something, if it's telling you your program has to do something, then make a short little comment about it. And that'll help you more focus on getting your assignment done. So I'll just start reading it. This week's assignment involves writing a program, a Python program, to collect all of the data of a road trip and calculate each person's share of the cost. So prompt the user for each of the following. So prompt the user for the following. Let's move this back over here. Okay. So what do we need to prompt the user for? Number of people on the trip. Number of days of the trip. And then for each day, that looks like a loop to me, right? For each day, the cost of food and the cost of gas. So just kind of like from the first paragraph, that's the comments I have. So what does this tell me I have to do so far? So you want to prompt the user. And what does that mean? That means get input from the keyboard, right? So prompt the user for the following: the number of people. So here we should ask the user to input the number of people. The number of days of the trip. Here we should ask the user to input how many days did the trip last. And then for each day, that sounds like a loop. So for each day, that's going to be for all the days on the trip, right? Here is where we're getting how many days are on the trip. And then we need to make a loop for each of those days. And for each of the days, we need to get the cost of the food for that day and the cost of gas for that day. All right, let's go to the next line. The food and gas cost should be stored in two separate arrays. So we need a food array. We need a gas array. Okay. So it's the cost of food for that day. It's the cost of gas for that day. All right. And then at the end, it says calculate and display to the following. Calc and display the following. What? Total cost of each category. You know, the categories are food and gas. The total cost of the trip. That's the food plus all the gas, right? And each person's share of the total cost. Right? Those are the things that need to calculate and display. And that's all there is to your program. So just by reading off one line at a time on your assignment, I've come up with all of these comments about what your program should do. Now it's up to you to do the code to make that happen. Okay, that wraps it up for today. I will go ahead and open it up for any questions you have. It doesn't just have to be on today's lesson. It could be about any of the material in the course or anything about assignments or anything Python or related. So the floor is open. No questions so far. I will stand by for about 1 more minute if there are any questions. If not, feel free to drop off whenever you want. I will get this uploaded to the course website a little bit later this morning, and I'll get the link sent out. But stand by 1 more minute for any last questions. All right, that's it. Everyone have a good weekend.